And that will probably do. Now we can close and save and start putting all this together. So we're going to close and save our project. So back in the After Effects timeline, the first thing we're going to do is duplicate our original layer with the effect on it. So I'm going to do Control or Command D to grab that. And then I'm going to call this one Stabilized Genes. And before I do any further work on this, I'm going to pre-compose this layer. So I'm going to do Command or Control Shift C to pre-compose. We're going to call this just Stabilized Genes Comp. And I'm going to move all the attributes into the new composition. So let's click OK on that. So now let's double click on the genes and go inside the layer. So here we are here. We've got our Stabilized Genes. I'm going to come up to Module Renders. I'm going to come down to Stabilize Unwarp, because we want to unwarp the clenching that happened in those genes there. And I'm going to click Render. And now when we scrub through the shot, we're going to see that that patch is stabilizing nicely. So now that we've done this, however, we need it to be on the other side. Now, a fun thing about the Mocha Pro effect is that it's always working on the original clip, unless you pre-comp it. So I can go ahead and make manipulations to this clip, and it won't translate inside the Mocha Pro track, which means that I can come and press S here for my scale. I'm going to unlink the scales together and make this -100 to flip it horizontally. And even though I flipped it horizontally here, it's not going to mess up my track because my track is still looking at the original clip. So now we have that stabilized frame on this side of the comp. So once we've flipped that around, we can go back into the main genes. So let's go back over to main genes. So we can see now it's flipped over here. I'm going to turn off those stabilized genes so we don't see them. And down in Ripped Genes Original, we're going to come to the original effect we did with the work on. And under Module Renders, I'm going to come down to Insert Layer and choose Stabilized Genes. Now we'll come and do this rendering part here in a second, but now we need to go back into the original effect and set up our insert module. Okay, so here we are back inside Mocha. And what I'm going to do now is I've got this little track here, but I'm not going to use it. I'm actually going to use a new mat that's going to link to this track. So what we're going to do is zoom in here. Let's just turn off the right genes track so we don't see it. And I'm going to draw a new mat around the rip itself. So we're going to grab our X-Spline tool, and I'm going to start up here, and we're just going to draw a fairly tight mat around that rip. So I'll smooth that out a little using my right click and clicking all handles. There we go. And now I'm going to take this and link it back to the right genes track. So we're going to come down to Link to Track, drop that down and choose the right genes track. And let's call this one Genes Rip Insert. So I'm going to drag that below my window mat just in case. And now when we scrub through here, we should see that mat linking to the original track. Wonderful. All right. So the next thing we want to do is bring in that insert layer that we stabilized. So in the same Genes Rip Insert, I'm going to choose Insert Clip and choose that insert layer that we set inside the plugin. So you can see here that currently it's very, very small. And this is because our surface, which I'll click on here, is usually the same size as the layer that we've drawn at the beginning. We can fix this by modifying it like this, but the easiest thing to do is come up to this button here, which is the Align Surface button, and that will push our insert to the full frame. So if I scrub through here now, you can see that that insert is now moving relative to the track we did, just expanded to the full dimensions of the footage. Now obviously this is too big, so we now need to go over to the Insert module. Let's come down here, click on this guy, and down here we've got use all foreground layers. I'm not going to use all foreground layers, I'm going to just use the Genes Rip Insert mat. And now we can see it's sitting inside that matte area. So we probably want to soften this out a bit, but first of all, I'm going to sort of move it into position. Now, at the moment, we could go ahead and modify the surface corners like this and try and get it into position this way, but instead what we're going to use is the warp function inside insert. So I'm going to click down here, and I'm going to show mesh, and this is way too much detail for what I need, so I'm going to bring my level down to about 2. So we can grab any corner like this and start moving it into position. So you can see how if I move this down, I can start lining up that right side insert to fit the seam on the left-hand side. So I'm just going to tweak that a little bit there. Now the problem we're going to have here is this pocket here, because you can see on the left-hand side that the pocket is much higher than the right. So we're probably going to have to do a little bit of rotation to make this work. So I'm just going to zoom out a little bit. And I'm going to rotate that around. So let's turn off our show mesh for a second. So we're going to pull this corner down a little bit. Just zoom out. And we'll drag it over a little bit. So we can start to see now it's fitting about right. Rotate that down a little bit. And then we can turn mesh on and continue tweaking. So I'm going to try and get this seam back to where it belongs. And this is going to take a little bit just to tweak it into the right spot. So we'll continue tweaking and come back when we're done. As we're tweaking here, there is a useful function you can do, which is actually to turn off the layer outline so we can see the edge. Because sometimes the spline itself can get in the way. So let's just turn that off so we can see what we're doing. And you can see quite a rough edge here. So what we might do first is I'll turn those layer outlines back on. We'll grab all of our points like this. And I'm going to just add a little bit of edge width. So you can see down here in edge properties, we've got edge width. I'm going to just increment that a few times to just bring out a little fall off. We can see our outer edge starting to appear here. So we want a little bit of an edge just to make it soften out a little bit. So now I'm going to turn those layer outlines off again by clicking this one right here. So we can see it now, it's fading a little bit more. So let's just keep on modifying the warp here so that we can fit it into position. Okay, so once we're happy with the overall position, we can start now tweaking the fall off on our mat. So let's just turn those layer outlines back on. I'm going to turn my show mesh off so I can see what I'm doing here. And I'm going to use the Alt key by holding that down, Alt or Option, and just selecting a point and dragging the outer point down so I can get that fall off. So you can see I can drag this as far as I like, and we can see how that falls off nicely and starts to blend in. So we'll do this a few times around the edges just to get that fall off. And that's starting to look pretty good. Don't worry too much about the fade here because this mat will cover that when we're over here. So we can make this as large as we like over this side, and then the window will cover up any of our mistakes. Okay, so we've got that now. So the next thing, very important part we need to do is actually play this back to see if it's working. The playback's going to be a little bit slower than usual because we're actually playing back a render from our stabilize on this side. So I'm going to be back. We've got that now. Then make this just nicely and starts to blend in. Drag this as and drag it by holding it off so I can see what I'm doing here. And I'm going to be tweaking the fall off on our mat. So let's just turn those layer outlines back on. I'm going to turn my show mesh off so I can see what I'm doing here. And I'm going to use the Alt key by holding that down, Alter Option, and just selecting a point and dragging the outer point down so I can get that fall off. So you can see I can drag this as far as I like, and we can see how that falls off nicely and starts to blend in. So we'll do this a few times around the edges just to get that fall off. And that's starting to look pretty good. Don't worry too much about the fade here because this matte will cover that when we're over here. So we can make this as large as we like over this side, and then the window will cover up any of our mistake. What we need to do is a little bit slow. So now we can see it in full. And click back in After Effects, now composite, and click render. And now we'll see that stabilized create a number of ways, front, and come up to, and which then will over the gene matte. So now this matte is covering over the genes there. And that's actually looking weird little bit that's going on here in a pre-comp. We can come and fix that up and comp that out. My composition, let's just double click. So I can this genes with this. I'm going to do like a control patch, centralized patch B away. Draw a little for a second and match. So we can see stabilized, it will match quite this mask here. So I'm going to come into the mask because otherwise, so stabilize. Here there's a bit of a start moving this patch to find a decent place to go. So we can see here there's a bit of a, it will match this will pull this like this. I'm going to click insert. Okay, if just so away with that thing from that patch, and then it's the warp section in this masks over here to speak inside and but there's multiple approaches when you're using the different Mocha modules inside Mocha Pro 2021 and beyond. For more Mocha tutorials, tips and news, visit us at borisfx.com. Hello, this is Mocha Product Manager Martin Brennan with a
Hi, I'm Mary Poppin with Boris FX, and today we're going to talk about the Align Surface tool and corner pinning mismatched resolutions. We will show you what to do when your screen insert is not the same size as your comp. For more about the Align Surface tool and corner pinning mismatched resolutions. We will show you what to do when your screen insert is not the same size as your comp. For most comps, insert is not the same size as. We will show you what to do when your screen insert is. We will show you what to do. Whatever your Mocha users get confused when they're when a pasted in effect to track this pull it clearly a difficult track. Used the new update to the adjust track module to correct value. screen and use Mocha Pro or Mocha AE for After Effects to track this screen. However, we've already baked that cake for you, and we're going to pull it right out of the oven nice and tracked. To break down what I did, as this is clearly a difficult track, I made a rough track of the screen with an increased value for rotation, used the new update to the Adjust Track module to correct any drift from the lighting shifts, and used Power Mesh to roto the hand on the screen. I linked the pin roto to the adjusted screen track. And I used a corner pin that supports motion blur out of Mocha to create the screen. With some blending mode magic, it looks like the screen was on the whole time. But this tutorial isn't about how to track this shot. It's about how to get the corner pin into AE correctly. So we aren't going to focus on the nitty-gritty of tracking here. We can do that in another tutorial. Let's talk about aligning your surface. Let's take a look at the screen. We are going to drag it over the top of our comp, and you can see very clearly this is not the same size as my comp. That's going to be a problem, and let me show you what that problem looks like. Let's align this image to my screen with a quick AE corner pin. And just to make sure the effects don't duel with one another, we will pre-compose this and move all the attributes into the new composition. If we now apply a corner pin right out of Mocha, look at how this is offset. Let's see why that is. Opening Mocha, you can see the surface tool is aligned to the screen. This is ideal when the insert is the same size as the comp. However, when you have a pre-aligned screen from your host, you need to use the Align Surface tool to fit the surface tool to the corners of the clip. So let's make sure we are on the same frame we aligned our screen on. In this case, frame 122. And click that Align Surface tool and see how the surface tool snaps to the edges. Perfect. In Mocha Pro, you can copy the tracking data right from the Tracking tab and paste it into your host on the first frame of your insert clip. But I am going to show you how to apply this data via the plugin interface because it's more foolproof for getting the data to apply correctly. Let's save and close Mocha. Back in the host, I will select the Create Tracking Data button. A Layer Controls menu will appear, and I will select my screen track. This is where naming your layers specifically comes in handy. I click OK, and the menu closes automatically. Now, under the Export Options drop-down menu, I select Corner Pin Supports Motion Blur. In the Layer Export To drop-down, I select what layer to apply this data to, in this case our screen, and I click Apply. I'm going to be the span the image. Use the same Move All Attributes into the new composition to surface to aligned in the Mocha Layer Control. Again, I click a drop-down menu for to our screen, and I click apply export. But because this method requires transforming up from a smaller resolution and back down again to another resolution, you might find you lose some detail. For a small screen like this, we can get away with it, as it is a bit easier and faster. But for a hero screen, I would use the align surface method instead of the fit to comp method. As correct, I can finish this shot. I'm going to take my mocha layer, applied with my matte, I click visitors. I'm going to apply matte and control the feathering right here inside of my lighter screen insert. Because our corner pins to behave themselves, as long as you account for how the corner pin
In this course,
motion graphic animations using specific techniques used to creating motion graphics. We've got a fair amount to cover, so let's get
or expand the insert itself. If you would like to know more about Mocha tracking, please visit us at www.borisfx.com. Let's take very close to my screen with that is tool to fit the surface tool and see how the surface tool snaps to the edges. Perfect. In Mocha Pro, you can copy the tracking data right from the Tracking tab and paste it into your host on the first frame of your insert clip. But I am going to show you how to apply this data via the plugin interface because it's more foolproof for getting the data to apply correctly. Let's save and close Mocha. Back in the host, I will select the Create Tracking Data button. A Layer Controls menu will appear, and I will select my screen track. This is where naming your layers specifically comes in handy. I click OK, and the menu closes automatically. Now, under the Export Options drop-down menu, I select Corner Pin Supports Motion Blur. In the Layer Export To drop-down, I select what layer to apply this data to, in this case our screen, and I click Apply Export. Now our aligned screen will move correctly throughout the shot. This aligned surface workflow is the preferred way to composite smaller images into larger ones, as the data stays crisper than the next method I'm going to show you. Now let's talk about resizing your insert. For this next method, Hi, Mary Poppins Insert module has a few useful fixes. We have added a tick box for a pre-multiplied alpha when importing graphics, which will fix fringing and improve rendering. Also, the Insert Clip Preview will now correctly display opacity settings while in the Insert module without having to render. For those struggling with Power Mesh, we have improved and addressed many areas of this exciting tool. In After Effects, we have fixed an annoying offset issue that occurred if you applied the Mocha Pro plugin to a trimmed layer. We have also addressed, better yet, layers that have meshing can be, and also writing a new. We have Mocha Pro instead of the bundle.
Hi guys, it's Vin with Boris FX, and in this quick tutorial for Vegas Pro 18, we're going to add a logo inside this actor's shirt with the help of Power Mesh, a brand new tracking engine for organic and warped surface tracking inside of Mocha Pro 2021. Okay, so here we are inside of Vegas Pro, and I have a clip of my actor here. Now what I want to do is add a logo to his shirt. Now the logo can really be anything, an image, a clip, it doesn't matter, so long as it has alpha. Now to really do something unique with this effect, I've imported this animated fish logo. It's a simple QuickTime movie with alpha, but I thought it would be cool to have an animated logo motion tracked to his shirt. Now in Vegas, when dealing with Pro 2021 to access the features, I want to insert my fish logo. Track all of the that's constant and warp with his body, warping of his shirt. So we need to track the movement of more than one plane. And for that, we're going to use the Mesh Tracker feature, which can be accessed here in the tracking module. But before we do that, I want to give you a really detailed look at what Mesh Tracker can do. Let's take a look at this clip here of an actor winking at the camera. I've drawn a spline shape around his face and removed the area around his eyes. Now there are two kinds of mesh generation available, automatic and uniform. Automatic will be the option that we will likely use the most. It's going to create a spline mesh intuitively, looking for contrasting pixels. With automatic selected, if I hit generate, you can see that it quickly generates a mesh. Down here in his beard, we get more splines because there's more contrast than, say, up here on his forehead. You can also see that each triangle generated attempts to follow the planar surface. If I change the mode to uniform and regenerate the mesh, you can see that the splines are simply a uniform grid. Both of these modes will give you great results, but for this example, and our logo insert, I'm going to select automatic. Mesh size will control the size of individual cells. Higher values will result in larger but fewer cells in the mesh. If I lower it, I can create hundreds of tiny cells. Now if you imagine that Mocha is keeping track of all the pixel data in each of those cells, you can imagine that for our purposes, leaving it to around 30 will result in a much faster track. Next, we have vertices on spline. Now this is typically on as default, and what it does is it forces the mesh vertices to link to the main spline. So for example, if you see here this part of the mesh isn't connected to the main spline. When I enable vertices on spline and regenerate, it creates more points connected to the spline for a finer, more detailed mesh. Adaptive contrast is an important function as it will increase the sensitivity of the pixel contrast detection, generating a more detailed mesh. Because our t-shirt has a lot of movement, and because for this example we want to make sure that we capture all the motion around our actor's eyes and around his nose, we're definitely going to want to enable this. There are two other options here. Smoothness will control how sensitive the mesh is. A higher amount will result in less sensitivity to change, whereas a lower value will increase that sensitivity. For this and our insert, we'll keep that at its default. Warp spline, however, is quite important. We'll want to make sure that this is enabled because what this will do is allow the main spline around his face and eyes to warp along with the mesh. And this will allow us to use all of that motion tracking data mapped to the movement of his face, or in the case of our logo actor, to his shirt. With that set up, I'm going to come down to my motion parameters and select perspective and mesh. Now you don't have to select perspective to activate mesh tracking, but since he turns his head a bit, let's go ahead and enable that and then hit track forward. I'll speed this up, but you can see that as Mocha tracks, that mesh is warping and distorting along with his face, especially around the eyes. And this is going to be very important when adding digital makeup or scars, or adding logos where there is a lot of movement and surface distortion. Now once that's done, let's move back to the first frame and jump over to the Stabilize module. Now this is new in Mocha 2021, and it allows you to take your mesh tracking data and stabilize your footage so you can, for example, do some roto painting and other digital work. Now that's something we'll cover in another tutorial, but what I want to show you is how this mesh data works with the footage and how it's different from traditional planar tracking. What I want to do is enable Mesh Warp and select Warp. This is going to warp my footage along with the mesh tracker data. To better see this in action, I'm going to turn off my overlays and enable Use Matte and set that to high. If I render that out a bit and then play that back, you can see just how powerful that mesh tracking is. We're getting all of this motion and tracking data, and the crinkles around his eyes and the stretching of his skin as he moves his facial muscles. It's all really very cool. But how does this translate back that I drew earlier that I've enabled vertices on spline and adaptive contrast? This will improve the detailness at default, push and push. Now you'll want to make our image. The surface that you show the planar surface up here, and that you align it to our image. This is going to do this when we stabilize Mocha to 0. The question is, how do we link actually then event select Mocha mesh to destabilize our fiction in the fact we only scratch the surface, but when it comes to adding a logo, all there is to it. I'm Vin Moriali with Boris FX, and for more great tutorials and to download your copy of Mocha Pro 2021, don't forget to check out
Mocha Pro 2021 introduces Power Mesh, a major update to Mocha's famous planar tracking technology. Power Mesh is designed to deliver a fast and accurate workflow for tracking organic and warped surfaces. And even better, Power Mesh can now be used to assist visual effects compositing, drive rotoscoping, and can be exported to a variety of host applications for finishing, effects, and motion graphics. So let's get started with the Power Mesh basics. Power Mesh can now track both rigid and non-rigid warped surfaces that were previously impossible to track with the Mocha default tracker. First, we will create a tracking mesh. Just like all Mocha tasks, we start by using the spline tools. So, I will use the X-spline tool to draw a layer around the area we want to track. Then, depending on the object motion, I will choose the appropriate planar tracking parameters: translation, rotation, scale, shear, and/or perspective. Note that Power Mesh is a subplanar tracking process that is applied on top of the Mocha planar tracking in one pass. Because of this unique process, you will find Power Mesh solves to be quite fast compared to other optical flow-based applications. Enable Power Mesh by clicking the Mesh button, and an initial mesh is automatically generated. Now we can refine the mesh generation and tracking options. Mesh generation mode contains two options: automatic and uniform. Automatic will determine the best mesh placement based on the pixels contained within the layer. Automatic is best paired with adaptive contrast to get the most detail. Uniform will generate a uniformly spaced mesh instead of using the image information. This uniform option can
You're watching the free version of Mocha Essentials.
explore the Power Mesh control.
This is Evan Abrams, and in this
Mocha Pro is adaptive contrast. If you want, we'll give us the mesh tracker below it or use the last smoothness. Then here, interface, we enable the warp spline option when a keyframing path save time. Non-rigid or will take advantage of the new Power Mesh-driven Roto workflow. File. To host application layers back to your workflow. One thing I am quite excited about is the ability to render a stabilized output driven by Power Mesh for advanced effects work. After mesh tracking, go to the Stabilize module and enable Mesh Warp to create an inverse stabilization. If you would like to view or export the Warp Stabilize patch, enable Use Matte and you can preview the output. Then we can exit the plugin and tick Render in Stabilize. Now we have a stabilized inverse warped patch for paint fixes, beauty work, and graphic inserts. Mocha users will appreciate this new ability to paint and work on a flattened surface, and the original motion is easily propagated back to the shot simply by reversing the effect. In this example, I will stabilize the object's original motion, then I will pre-comp it and replace my logo with paintwork or added graphics. And to reverse the stabilization, we simply copy and paste the Mocha effect and invert the motion to get back to our original clip. This amazing workflow can be done inside many hosts, including After Effects, Nuke, and paste my logo. Then I will pre-comp it Now we have a stabilized inverse warped patch for. Check out our new Alembic exports. Beyond the render options, you can also export PowerMesh dense tracking data to multiple host applications, including After Effects nulls and our new Alembic 3D exporter. Here, we've used PowerMesh to track these hands and then converted the data to AE nulls. With a little magic using the Plexus plugin, we've quickly created this motion graphics look, using more tracked data than a typical Mocha project and without having to use multiple surfaces. I hope you're as excited about PowerMesh as I am. Check out our new tutorials on Mocha Pro 2020's new features to explore other workflows like Alembic exports, tutorials on surfaces. I hope you're as excited about PowerMesh as I am. Check out our new tutorials
Boris Effects present and post-production. Mocha Pro introduces Power Mesh, the exciting new subplanar tracking tool, and the hood engine tracking to your generate a stabilized mesh flow render passes, bringing a speedy process while you work.
background color, you can add a marker. Add a marker on the little bar. On you finish, add the effect Twix Store and copy my settings. For the
ね、初めて見るテクニックが多いと思います。そのしづらいので、覚えること。はいどうもこんにちは。今回ですね、つい先日といっても数ヶ月前なんですけども、こういったですね、ミュージックビデオを作らさせていただきまして、広島でですね、活動しているミルソートレルっていうバンドの、Go Back to the Moon っていう曲なんですが、こちらのですね、受注だったり、ツイッターで香水のかで、あれを文字2日、ゼロ知識っていうとあれなんですけど、いうところで7日目文字、これですね。これはパーティキュラーとオプティアフターエフェクツ明日に感じです。ここにピッて入れてあげるともう点滅する。14,000円ぐらいですかね。スレコンクリートははいどうもこんにちは。後半のポイントみたいなところを流民1ピクセルを繰り返す 0.6 にしてつくでしょ。さんも僕と同じようにやっていける質問いただいてた再現することができるし、他のバはいどうもこんにちは。今回作るのはこちら。フォトコラージュアニメーションの作り方です。無制限を入れてるという動画に、これをいでたちがかっこよくなるようにします。
Hi, this is Ross Shane from Boris Effects. In this video, I'm going to show you how I created the stylized rotoscope animation inside Adobe After Effects with Mocha planar tracking and masking tools. I always loved that, and more recently, adults are useful for this project. I found this clip on the free stock footage site pexels.com. If you'd like to try yourself, you can find the download link in the video description. I created all the effects to let Mocha. If we want to attach more shapes to the image, here you can see that I set up tracking layers for different areas of the face, the arms, the fingers, and the camera that move differently. Understanding the motion properties in the tracking tab is important, for Roto can often help to turn off skew and perspective. For example, the ear is relatively flat and was tracked with fingers, using the shape to organize more room in the visuals, organization, or I have a master grade setup hand. Then I went through the timelines that slide. We scale will produce multiple tools. Assisted screen feature is edge dragging. I like magnetic. If you want to learn more about the differences between Mocha and center the object in the viewer. With quick stabilize on, we can scrub the timeline to this help you evaluate the entire show the layers, various more backup. So Mocha inside under file, the location of this. I exit the window, we draw a large project in this manner faces and put them onto solid layers. This is an easy way to start playing with the color fills and opacity, copy them on their own layer organization to masks without jumping back and forth between the interfaces. For organization, I duplicated my Mocha effect for each object group and put them on their own layer with the proper name. Then I created the masks for this group and copied them onto solid layers. This is an easy way to start playing with the more Mocha. I hit to the track. While this video covers Mocha for animation, I do
of the stone.
Ball game regalia.
This Boris Effects webinar replay is brought to you by our technology partners, Dell, NVIDIA, and Intel.
All right, so the G-Mask tracer, I just want to talk about that really quick before we hop into anything else, but that is a new feature that a lot of people asked for, and the nice thing about it is it, shift tracker. So Ross is going to love, because it's his favorite, is unicorns. And so I've added some, thank you. I knew you would get a kick out of that. Anyway, I wanted to add some new graffiti onto this wall because, let's say we have graffiti that we have to cover up for rights purposes or whatever. We can put something new on top of it. This is actually using something that we have worked on for a while now, and it is an updated perspective shift tracker. So it's part of our planar tracker, but as you guys might know, if you've used Mocha for a long time, sometimes when objects moved too far into perspective, you'd see the surface tool and shape tool collapse in on itself. And that was because we had this problem where the surface would go behind the camera because of how Mocha was doing the math for this shot. Now, in order to correct this, we've actually talked a little bit, let's go back to track this walk and quickly cover the cool. What we would do normally is we would, if we want to our selected layer here, yeah, very good. All right, so if we want to track this wall, for example, what we would do normally is we would do the link to track none trick, and that's a pretty cool trick for those of you that have never used Mocha before. When you track in Mocha, I'm just going to really quickly cover the basics here. When you track in Mocha, the surface tool is what the track is doing, and the shape is where the track is looking, and they're separate from one another, okay? And we're just going to give you a little remedial on this really quick, so stay tuned if you have used Mocha before and this is old hat to you. But one of the things about this is, shear, if you guys ever seen using, is we've gone back in place, not defined, and that's in the past of pixels is for what we call sub-pixel motion, which is like, think of it as half pixel motion. Your camera's on a tripod and the wind is total. I just want your product put. All right.
Still there?
Inside of after the mask when you render. See, it's live. A little bit later, how we can up.
Hello, this is Mocha Pro.
apply our mats as multiple shapes, but just for this, the purpose of this, I want to show you that we're calculating motion blur. The way we do that is we apply motion blur right here in Edge Properties. Okay, we save and close. And then what we can do is we can apply our mat. We can even add a feather if we want to, but we apply our mat as part of a plugin, so we don't even have to deal with splines. When we hit render, you can see that it is rendering so much faster than it used to right here in our interface. Now, I am on a laptop. Now, I am on a beefy laptop, to be sure, but I am on a laptop, and that's how fast it's rendering. So, pretty cool. And for those of you that are asking what the graphics card is, I believe it's the GTX 5000. All right, now, what we can do is we can also export this as a spline. So let's talk a little bit about Roto inside of Mocha. So we'll talk about this shot a little bit, and then I'm going to show you how to do it. So what I've done with this shot, let me just turn that off. What I've done with this shot is I've rotoscoped this guy, and I've sort
of how it was an invaluable tool. It was much easier to work with. We could work very quickly because the spline shape, this little point inside of or any color of the screen. In this, I've got the image on the last frame. Cool. So make sure look go on the edge. Maybe we can do 3 on actually on the screen, and we're going to use Sapphire for the first the first thing. I'm still glowing, and then you can see effect editor the screen, and okay. And we might want to actually out of Mocha. Back under module renders, make sure shots here shape is 6 feels pretty good. Results zoom the shot and stunt where and just a background. Select my wire layer.